Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kadina Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Praptasya Kadina Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Romanchakam Pasu Taranga Vajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringara Tanma Diramajanado Jukta Sabhaktam Sa Niyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kritvaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Radhikama Bhavayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Shri Radhikama Para Madhura Lila Pratikshana Dhanalolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Pratikshana Dhanalolupasya Vande Guru Ne Kunjayono Ratike Visidhyai Jajali Bheri Yukti Apekshaniya Nekundayono Tatratidakya Ativala Vasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Sakcha bharitena Shamasta shashri Ruktastathava Gataiva sadhabi Shamasta shashri Kintu praborja Priya eva tasya Vande Garashi Charanaravrindam. Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Dayam Stovam Tasya Yasatri Sanjam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Dhyayam Stovam Tasya Yasatri Sanjam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shonavadi Vattatari Shatadine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shonavadi Vattatari Shatadine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Shri Advaita Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Bol Hare Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Yaraye Namah, Krishna Jadavaye Namah, Jadavaye Madhavaya Kesavaye Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Vataraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Shri Radha, Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Shri Radha, Nila Madhav, Radhe Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra, Jagannath, Baladeva, Subhadrama, Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Lakshman Hanuman, Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Pramanande, Haribo. Jai Vishwapara Paramahansa Prabhaja Gacharya. Iskon Krishna Bhakti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siramani Gaura Piyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana. Abhaycharavina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Vargapati Udhari ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ji ki jai. Jayananta Kuch Vaishnavrind ki jai. Prem se Koho se Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrind ki jai. Jai Param Dayal Se Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Jai Pramanama Sankirtane ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandan Shriman Gauranga Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahavarana Avatar ki jai. Golokera Pramadhan Harinam Sankirtan Jaga ki jai. Jug Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Brihat Midanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Radha Kund Samakunda Giriraj Govardhan ki jai. Shri Brajabhum Vrindavan Mathur Dham ki jai. The Lordship Shri Radha Nilamadhava ki jai. Shri Mayapur Madhup Eka Chakra Dham ki jai. Parama Karuna Shri Gaura Nitai ki jai. Shri Purushottama Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Srimati Subhadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan ki jai. Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Karna Shingare Bhagavan ki jai. Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Madhuradharani ki jai. Shamaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gauri Pramanandi Hari. All glories to somebody bodies, all glories to somebody bodies, all glories to somebody bodies, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. Nitai Gauri Pramanandi Hari Hari. Prahlada
Hiranyakashipu Vakshaha
Hiranyakasipu Vakshaha Silatanka Nakalani Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga Jaya Jatta Jato Jamitato Nisinga Bahir Nisinga Hridaye Nisinga Narasimha Madim Sharana Prabhade Tabakara Kamalavare Nakam Adibutta Singha Dalita Hiranyakasipu Tanavringa Isabadita Navadirupa Jai Jagadisha Jai Jagadisha Jai Jagadisha Kesavadrita Navadirupa Jai Jagadisha Jai Jagadisha Jai Jagadisha Jaya Nishingade Jaya Nishingade Nishingade Jaya Nishingade Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Bhakta Prahlad Srila Prahlad Maharaj Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada Shri Vrindai Tulasi Divyai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shattavatai Namo Namaha Vrindayai Tulasidevyai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shartavataye Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasidevyai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shattvataye Namo Namaha. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki. Namo Namo Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha. Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha. Radha Krishna Seva Pavam Ayo Bilasi. Radha Krishna Seva Pavam Ayo Bilasi. Radha Krishna Seva Pavam Ayo Bilasi. Je tomara sharanala tara vancha puna. Je tomara sharanala tara vancha puna. Kripa koi karo tare Vrindavana Vasi. Tumi kripa karo tare Vrindavana. Moraiyo Vilas kunje Diyoba. Moraiyo Vilas kunje Nayane Ribo Shada Jugala Ruparasi Amina. Ei nivedana dara sakira no gata koro. Seva yadi koro diye koro nijadasi. Dina Krishna dase koi ei enamorao. Shri Radha Govinda preme sada inavasi. Shri Radha Govinda preme sada inavasi. Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo. Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo. Yani Kanisha Papani Brahmahatari Kanisha Tani Tani Pranasanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Yani Kanisha Papani Brahmahatari Kanisha Tani Tani Pranasanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Yani Kanisha Papani Brahmatari Kanisha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Tulsi Maharani, Vrinda Devi. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shuddhavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shuddhavatai Namo Namaha. Brindaye tulasi debai priyaye kesava satya Vishnu bhakti pradevi Shatavataye namo namaha. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. I desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavi damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maidservant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrindadevi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpana Marjanam Mahamahadavani Vapanam Shri Karivachandika Vitaranam Vidyavadhu Jivanam Anandam Bodhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Param Paravijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Namnamakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Itadrisitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaiva Midrishamya Jani Nanuragaha Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sarishnuna Amanina Maradena Kirtaniya Sadari Adanam Lajanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vaja Karishaka Maye Mama Janmani Janmaneshwari Bhavatar Bhakti Raitu Kitani Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritamam Vishrame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shrudharaya Vadanam Gada Gada Rudaya Gira Ulakai Nishitam Bapukada Tavanamagane Bhavisati Yugaitam Nimishena Chakusha Pravusaitam Shunaitam Jagad Sarvam Govinda Verahinam Asli Shava Padaratam Pinasvama Adashanar Manmahatam Karotuva Yatadat Ava Vidadatulam Patu Matprana Tastu Saivana Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krastakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavarandaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Maha. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, Your holy name alone can bring the whole benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names.
O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach
your holy names. But
but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than a straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O mighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your holy name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Sri Chaitanya Siksastakam Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Dinami. Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi. Paskatya Desatarni.
The 18 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided, they are as follows. 1.
To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives to propagating the holy names of the Lord.
2.
To consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to Lord Vishnu.
3.
To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature in pursuance to the Vedic version.
5.
To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna as imagination. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord.
7.
To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord.
8.
To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in the Vedas as fruitive activities of karma kanda.
9.
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. To not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa, Kripa Sindhubhye Vicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Satara. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Aganyati Mirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Pachakamalan Shri Gurun Vaisnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Nimitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Disatarine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Visidanta Saraswati Tinamini Shri Varsavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhame Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasidanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padamba Jayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Baba Bhumistwam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhoma Shri Jagannatayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Premapadayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madan Mohano Divyadrindaranya Kalpradumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simasanastato Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamanos Marami Shiman Rasa Rasaram Bivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswanir Gopir Gopinatak Striyesturna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhe Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chentamani Prakarasat Matsukalpa Vriksha Laksavrite Susarabir Abhipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrahma Sevyamanam Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venum Kvananda Atarend Karma Bandhan Darangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandrakala Sadvanamalya Vamsiratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Taprakasam Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnan Yasya Utsakalendri Ritimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vedesa Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragam Yovayora Tapi Manasomani Pungamanam Sopyasti Yat Papadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatam Jagadanda Kotim Yajas Chakti Rasta Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayanabusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitastuvanti Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bhistavirya Evani Jarupa Tayakalabi Goloka Evani Visata Kilapna Bhuto Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Yadayisu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundarama Chintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukala Nimenatistan Nana Avatar Makarod Bhuvanesa Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramampo Mamyo Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhu Jagaranda Koti Koti Swasesa Vasadadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahman Iskalam Anantam Asesa Bhutam Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Mayahi Yasya Jagaranda Satani Sute Traigunya Tad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sadva Vulambi Parasatvam Vitsiritsaktvam Govinda Amadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasab Mataya Manasura Yaprani Nam Prativalam Smaratam Upetya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jaya Yajasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijatamni Tadechitasha Devi Mahiso Aditamas Tesu Tesu Tete Prabhavani Jaya Vyajastayena Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shististati Pralaya Sadhava Sakti Reka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Chanurupam Apyasya Chesta Tesa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasambhutam Apitata Samapaitikarya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Hita Santanam Abhyupetya Dipayate Rivita Hetu Samanu Dharma Yastadra Gevihicha Vishnutaya Vibhati Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narnava Jale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidramananta Jagadanda Saroma Kupa Adhara Saktim Avalambya Param Swarutim Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Niswasita Kalamata Avalambya Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagadanda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalabi Sesu Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalation Jesa Teja Swayam Kiyat Prakatiyat Apitad Vadatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vidaya Kumbha Twande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihanta Malamasya Jagatrayasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Maruti Sascha Kalas Tatatma Manasiti Jagatrayan Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahana Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrata Kala Chakra Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Sutayastapamsi Parmadi Kita Patagava Desta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Kopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Pandan Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdati Kintu Chibakti Bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaskro Kama Katsaja Pranati Biti Vyavasa Yamoha Guru Gora Vasavya Bhava Sanchintya Tasya Sadrisintanam Apurete Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiyakanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpatarava Dramabu Mishchintamani Kanama Itayam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivam Sipriyasa Kechiranandam Jotij Param Apitada Swadyam Apichasa Yachashiradi Bihishavidi Shirabi Byasta Suma Nimesar Dakyo Vavrajitina Hiya Trapi Samaya Bija Switadvikam Tamaham Ihigolakam Itiyam Vidantaste Santakshati Virat Charakatipaya Guru Vastika prayers for Kisha. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy. Just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master, who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. Spiritual master is always engaged in the temple where Sri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes, Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master, to be honored, is much the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, verse number 5. Priyam Prabhurgramya Iva Priyaya Vidishur Archad Dutaram Yadarte Vajri Adravatam Saganu Rusandaha Krida Rigo Nunam Ayam Vidundam Vadudam Priyam of the dear wife, Prabhu, the Lord, Gramya, ordinary living being, Eva, in the matter of, Priyaha, just to please, Viditsu, wishing, Archat, brought about, Duttarum, the Parijata flower tree, Yat, for which, Arte, in the matter of, Vajri, Indra, the king of heaven, Adravatam, went forward to fight with him, Sagana, with full strength, Rusha, in anger, Anda, blind, Krida, Mriga, henpecked, Nunam, of course, Ayam, this, Vadunam, of the wives. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Just to please his dear wife, the Lord brought back the Parijata tree from heaven, just as an ordinary husband would do. But Indra, the king of heaven, induced by his wives, henpecked as he was, ran after the Lord with full force to fight him. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord once went to the heavenly planet to present an earring to Aditi, the mother of the demigods, and his wife Satyabhama also went with him. There is a special flowering tree called Parijata, which grows only in the heavenly planets, and Satyabhama wanted this tree. Just to please his wife, like an ordinary husband, the Lord brought back the tree, and this enraged Vajri, or the controller of the thunderbolt, Indra. Indra's wives inspired him to run after the Lord to fight, and Indra, because he was a henpecked husband and also a fool, listened to them and dared to fight with Krishna. He was a fool on this occasion because he forgot that everything belongs to the Lord. There was no fault on the part of the Lord, even though he took away the tree from the heavenly kingdom. But because Indra was henpecked, dominated by his beautiful wives like Sachi, he became a fool, just as all persons who are dominated by their wives are generally foolish. Indra thought that Krishna was a henpecked husband who only by the will of his wife Satyabhama took away the property of heaven, and therefore he thought that Krishna should be punished. He forgot that Krishna is the proprietor of everything and cannot be henpecked. The Lord is fully independent, and by his will only he can have hundreds and thousands of wives like Satyabhama. He was not therefore attached to Satyabhama because she was a beautiful wife, but he was pleased with her devotional service and thus wanted to reciprocate the unalloyed devotion of his devotee. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Just to please his dear wife, the Lord brought back the Parijata tree from heaven, just as an ordinary husband would do. But Indra, the king of heaven, induced by his wives, henpecked as he was, ran after the Lord with full force to fight him. So here we see a comparison between Indra, who's henpecked. Henpecked is an English-derived word. It's a dual word, henpecked. In other words, one is influenced by the hen. The hen is the female chicken. So when someone is henpecked, they listen to the foolish things their wife says, and they follow it. Whereas normally, the husband should hear the right things that the wife says and follow it, but not the foolish things. So there's a difference between the two. So here we see Krishna is not henpecked, but Indra is. But unless you read the purport, you would think they're both henpecked. And that's why we should not simply read the verses, we have to also read the purport. There are people that, go all over the internet only reading the verses of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and other books. That's a mistake. We should hear the verse and understand the purport. Otherwise, we're simply mouthing words without really understanding the deep meanings of them. So the purport is absolutely essential to understand what the verse says. Okay, so there's a difference between Krishna, who's married, and Indra, who's married. Indra is basically controlled by his very beautiful wives. Krishna is not controlled by his beautiful wives, although they're exquisitely beautiful. First of all, Krishna is not an ordinary person, so Indra is treating him like an ordinary person. Why? Because he's puffed up with the power that he has. And he has a lot of power. He's the king of the Devas. And he has this thunderbolt, which is almost an invincible weapon. So, and he thinks that everything in the heavenly planets belongs to him. All those ideas are false ideas. Therefore, he needs to be corrected. And when Krishna takes the Parijata tree, which is a very wonderful tree and very fragrant, Indra reacts due to his ignorance, and Krishna teaches him a lesson. But it doesn't stop there. Indra again will become puffed up and try and stop Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan because he gets angry that Krishna stopped the Indra Puja, stopped his father from worshipping Indra. So again, Indra was defeated. Many times, Indra makes big mistakes, and he once defiled the wife of a great yogi, and he was cursed to have his body covered with vaginas, and then it was so embarrassing for him. So he begged that it be different than that. So then they were transformed into eyes. That also is shocking, but it was not as bad as having a female genital all over your body. So we see Indra has often made many mistakes. What's the difference between Indra, who sometimes does things as bad as the demons, and the demons? The demons will never surrender to Krishna, nor will they take good advice. Whereas Indra, ultimately as a demigod, he will surrender to the Lord and take good advice and be corrected. So if you have a child that refuses categorically to be corrected, that means there's something seriously wrong with the child. And if you yourself refuse to be corrected, then there's something wrong with you, or any of us who refuse to be corrected. So the identifying quality of a devotee is that they're willing to be corrected when they make mistakes. Of course, there are many people, it doesn't matter, they're a demigod or a devotee, they get so puffed up that they think they know everything and they refuse to be corrected. And that means they're on a very, very fast track to deviate from Krishna consciousness. So sometimes Prabhupada would severely chastise his devotees. And he would explain, this is my duty as the guru. I have to correct your mistakes. And you should not get upset because you should be happy. You should be happy that mistakes are being corrected. Right? One time Prabhupada corrected me somewhat severely, and I felt happy in my heart that he would take the time to correct me, and that means that he actually has affection for his disciple when there's correction. So here Indra, being puffed up, and besides that, being henpecked by his wives, does a very foolish thing. He tries to pursue Krishna and attack him and take back the Parijata tree. And of course, he failed to do that. And in life, we have to realize we're all going to be defeated because we're all going to get old, sick, and die. And everything we've accumulated in this life materially is all going to be taken away from us. So why should we be, let's say, in illusion that I am the controller, I am the enjoyer, everything can belong to me, this thing is mine, that thing is mine, and so forth. All that is Maya's trick to keep us conditioned in the material world and subject to adhyatmika, adhibhotika, adhidaivika miseries. Miseries of this body, miseries caused by other bodies, and miseries caused by cataclysmic events of nature that are under the control of the devas. So when there is a hurricane or an earthquake, the devas are controlling those things. And people suffer due to their karma individually and collectively. So, therefore, it says, there was no fault on the part of the Lord, or Lord Krishna, even though he took away the tree from the heavenly kingdom. But because Indra was henpecked, dominated by his beautiful wives like Sachi, he became a fool, just as all persons who are dominated by their wives are generally foolish. Well, this is not an indictment of all women. When a wife, a good wife, gives good advice to her husband, he should follow it. It's only when a wife says something foolish and the husband, because of attachment to sense gratification, follows her advice, her foolish advice, both of them are condemned for such behavior, and they suffer. So, therefore, we have to know the difference. See, whenever anything appearance or is consistent with Shastric evidence, no matter who says it, we should respect it. Okay? You have to understand what Shastric evidence is, but whenever anything is spoken, even by a very, let's say, low-class person, but if they say something that is true, we should accept it, because it's true due to the fact that he's simply repeating something that is shastrically validated. So, therefore, you can accept truth from a low-class person, and like, for example, although Chintamani was a prostitute, she gave very good advice to the gentleman that approached her, and he followed it, and he accepted her as one of his gurus. So we see that what do we learn when we come to class? We learn to understand properly Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So if you never come to class, you'll never understand properly, and that means that people will end up making many mistakes, thinking, oh, well, I'm initiated, I chant rounds, therefore I know what I'm doing. No. The Vedic knowledge is very, let's say, detailed, and to understand it, it takes a long, long time, and it's based on hearing and chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam. So this hearing is absolutely important. And in the same way, simply hearing the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, will lead to mistakes, because you can misinterpret them very easily. Therefore, you have to hear the purports, and the purports elaborated by genuine devotees are the best way to understand Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so this is not an indictment of all women. It's an indictment of foolish women and men who accept the foolish, let's say, instructions of foolish women. they all end up doing things that are, worthy of being punished. And that's exactly what happened here. Indra thought that Krishna was a henpecked husband who, only by the will of his wife Satyabhama, took away the property of heaven, and therefore he thought that Krishna could be punished. So you see, every one of those points that Indra assumed was wrong. Why? Because unless you understand the science of Krishna, you will make the same mistakes, or we will make the same mistakes. So what is the science of Krishna? It's what we're learning every day. Krishna is Paramatma in the heart of every living entity. Krishna is not an ordinary person. He's not subject to the three modes of material nature. He's not subject to time. He controls time, right? He's not. He is also, whenever he appears in the material world, he appears with his spiritual potency. He's not in the material nature, even though it looks like he is, but he's not. He's always surrounded by his spiritual potency, Yogamaya. So, therefore, it's very easy, if you never come to class, to misinterpret Krishna and make mistakes like Indra. But if you regularly come to classes, then you will understand the science of Krishna. These are eternally true qualities of the Lord that are true in every frame of reference and in all time, past, present, and future. That's why it's called science of Krishna. We have to understand this word science correctly. And the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of Krishna. So this is the highest science. It's not like the science of the junk philosophers and scientists who are always changing their theories. All the time they're changing their theories. If you read the book Dialectic Spiritualism, where Prabhupada is analyzing all the major philosophers from the time of the Greeks up to today, and you'll see each one of these philosophers has a different take on reality. And whatever is correct, Prabhupada points out, and whatever is incorrect in their philosophy, he points out. So if you want to learn philosophy, don't go to college and take a philosophy course. You will not understand it properly. You want to understand philosophy, you read Dialectic Spiritualism with the commentary of Prabhupada. Then you'll understand real philosophy. So without the help of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, we remain in darkness and we make our own judgments. And this is the problem with modern society, especially after the so-called Age of Enlightenment. You can look that up right now, Age of Enlightenment. It started at the end of the 17th century, went into the 18th century, and 19th century.
17th and 18th century.
Yes. And one of the big idiots of that period was John Locke, who was considered the father of the American Constitution, in a sense, because most of the concepts that were put into the Constitution of the United States came from John Locke. And he was one of the top people of the Enlightenment period. Now, what did John Locke teach? Well, he was teaching that basically he's following Aristotle, that man is the measure, not God. Man is the measure. He spoke a little bit about God, so it was still the 17th century, so you had to mention God a little bit because otherwise no one would listen to you at that time. But he subverted the philosophy. The previous, let's say, predominant philosophy in Europe was scholasticism, which was basically the Christians, monks, who were saying you have to base everything on Shastra, on Bible, right? But that led to problems because some people interpreted Bible in one way and other people interpreted it another way. So John Locke comes along in the age of enlightenment, and he was one of the leaders of it. And he said, "Look, we can't depend on other people's speculation. I mean, if you're going to depend on speculation, depend on your own speculation, right? Why do you have to depend on somebody else's speculation?" So he opened up the door where everybody can speculate now, not just the priests and the scholastic scholars, you know. So and George Washington thought that John Locke was the smartest man that ever existed. See, that's why the Constitution of the United States is flawed. It has a lot of mistakes in it, right? But everybody, you know, like worships it like it's Shastra, you know. But there's a lot of mistakes in it. Okay, so here we see Indra. He thought that Krishna was a henpecked husband who only by the will of his wife Satyabhama took away the property of heaven, and therefore he thought that Krishna could be punished. So he thinks that, you know, he owns the property of the heavenly planets, and it's just like, you know, Ukraine and Russia, or the United States and China. You know, everybody thinks they own the land. They don't own anything, right? I mean, right where we're sitting now, 160 years ago, this was not the United States. This place was controlled more or less by the Russians, and somewhat by the native Indians. The Russians, you know, they had all of Alaska, and they came down somewhat to Washington, what's called Washington today, and they spread their church, the Russian Orthodox Church. Those churches are still there in Alaska, right? Even here, there's some of them. So we see this is a very fluid thing, you know, who owns the property. And what's going on now between Russia and Ukraine, the same thing. You know, Russia said, look, the Ukraine has always been part of Russia, and it's our land, you know. And then Ukrainians say, no, it's not your land. We're different than you, although they speak virtually the same language. They have the same religion, the same saints, and so forth, and the same culture. They eat the same garbage, both of them, and so forth. So we see how it's very easy to speculate and make up things and then fight about it and kill for it. See? So unless we are trained in the Vedic Shruti or the Vedic Shastra, we will begin to speculate, because John Locke was promoting speculation. He said it's a good thing. Darwin, if you read this book by Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness, he quotes Darwin. Darwin wrote, blatantly that he was speculating when he he says speculation is a good part of science. So we see how the Enlightenment period was a catastrophe, because it opened a door for everyone to speculate. And that's been going on for now 300 years or more. So, and the other thing is wrong too, to misinterpret Shastra. That's what the Mayavadis have done. And that's what the Christians did too. Like it says, thou shalt not kill. So what do? See, before they were a dominant religion, the Christians more or less were more serious about being vegetarian and following Jesus' examples and his teachings. Once they were able to convince kings to convert to Christianity, and then whole countries with armies and treasuries, they compromised. And they said, no, it doesn't mean thou shalt not kill. It means thou shalt not murder. So murder is when you kill a human being, right? Kill means kill anything, right? So they changed things. And they also said, oh, it's not what goes in your mouth that is bad, but it's what comes out of your mouth that's bad. So that opened the pathway to eat meat, say. And because kings like to eat meat, they changed the philosophy. Jesus himself was a vegetarian. He was not a meat eater. And people go, oh no, that's not right. You know, he fed fish to 4,000 people. Well, wait a minute. He multiplied 4 fish to feed 4,000 people. And Prabhupada said, if you have the power to multiply 4 fish to feed 4,000 people, then you can eat meat also. So if you don't have that power, then don't do it. You see? So unless we have an acharya who knows what they're talking about, rather than a priest who really doesn't know what he's talking about, we're going to misinterpret things. So Indra completely misinterprets things, and basically it's called Atmavan Manyate Jagat. This is a Sanskrit phrase that means that when a foolish person looks at God, he imposes on God all his foibles. That's a nice word, foible, F-O-I-B-L-E. Look that up. F-O-I-B-L-E. What does it mean?
A minor weakness.
A minor weakness or eccentricity in someone's character.
Yeah, it's basically mistakes.
Mistakes, yeah.
Right. So, if we deviate, if we start speculating, we're going to commit many foibles, many mistakes, minor mistakes and big mistakes. So that's and why? Because we're projecting on what we see our own misunderstandings. So that's exactly what Indra does here. Indra thought that Krishna was a henpecked husband. He's henpecked. Krishna is not henpecked, right? A henpecked husband who only by the will of his wife Satyabhama took away the property of heaven. First of all, the Parijata flower is not the property of heaven. It's the property of Krishna. And Krishna is not a henpecked husband. He is like dealing with Satyabhama the same way he deals with his devotees. Because Satyabhama is a good devotee and is always doing things according to Krishna's instructions. When she made a little request of, having this beautiful Parijata tree, Krishna says, okay, fine, because you're going to use it in my service. So that's the criterion. Are we going to use something in Krishna's service, or are we going to use something or abuse something for our own sense gratification? That's the difference. Indra was interested in sense gratification. Krishna was interested in devotional service. There's a big difference between the two. So a person who just reads this would say, well, wait a minute, Indra was right. Krishna, it looks like he was henpecked by Satyabhama, right? So that's how deviations begin. And this is explained even further. The philosophy of this misinterpretation is explained in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita very nicely, where it says, for example, it says, let's see one second, 17th chapter, verse number 2. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, embodied by a material body, one's faith can be of 3 kinds, in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance. Now hear about this. So, here we see that the criterion for how people see darshan, right, is the word for philosophy, how they see things, is based on which modes of material nature they're influenced by. Therefore, there are many different religions today. Therefore, there are many different conceptions. Even in one religion, there are many different conceptions and arguments going on about the interpretation of Shastra, right? And then oftentimes people split apart. Just like now, the biggest Protestant group of Christians is breaking apart. Look up, Methodist Church is in turmoil. Methodist, yeah. Yeah. What's the turmoil about? It's about letting female lesbians become priests. Before it was about males, male homosexuals become priests. Now the female lesbians want to become priests also. Does it say anything?
Yeah. So
The United Methodist Church announced a proposal Friday to split the denomination over what it called fundamental differences regarding its beliefs on the same-sex marriage and LGBTQ clergy.
There you go. Same-sex, I forgot that. Same-sex marriage. Yeah. You see, this is the biggest group of Protestants, right? They're breaking apart because there's Atmavan Manyate Jagat, people projecting their misconceptions on God. So some people say, oh, God accepts everyone. So he'll accept the LGBT priests and the same-sex marriage. Wait a minute. Where does that said in the Bible? It's not in the Bible. And definitely not in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, it says, anyone with that type of appetite is a demon. And it says that in the beginning time, there were sons of Brahma who were homosexuals, who tried to attack Brahma himself. And in the purport, where that verse is, Prabhupada says, that appetite is demoniac. Okay, but because, now, I remember when we invited Prabhupada to Paris, we organized a big program for him in Slough, Pleyel, which is a big place. You can get 2,000-3,000 people there. And there were over 2,000 people that came to that program. And during the program, there was a bunch of communists, French communists that came, and they tried to disrupt the program. Right? So we had made a very beautiful Vyasa-san for Prabhupada. So they objected that why is he sitting on that big seat, because they object to anything that because they believe that everyone has to be equal, which means you go down to the lowest level to make everyone equal. So they started screaming and making noise and saying, get off the seat, like that. And then Prabhupada stopped them and they said, look, if you are willing to listen to what I'm saying, I will get off the seat and sit on the ground. And that was a shocking statement that they didn't expect. And then they kept quiet. And then Prabhupada continued. The way he said it and the timing and everything, it just shut them down. And also, the idea that everyone is equal, and they artificially try and make everyone equal. It failed. They tried to do that in the Soviet Union for like 70 years, and it failed. So everyone is not born equal materially, but everyone has the same potential spiritually. So they avoid that because the communism rejects belief in God. So therefore, their experiment in communism failed. And Prabhupada said if they would become spiritual communists, then they would succeed. Because Krishna consciousness is a type of communism. It means communism, living in community. And even though there are 4 castes, or 4 divisions of work and 4 divisions of spiritual advancement. When everyone cooperates, everybody makes spiritual advancement, and everyone can go back to Godhead. Doesn't matter you're Sudra or Brahmana. If they all cooperate in the Varnashram system, they can all go back to Godhead. So to make everyone artificially equal does not work. It just brings everybody down to the lowest level. And that's what they're doing in school today. And then previously, there used to be advanced classes that people could take, right? The kids could take. Now, I guess they still have that, but there was actually advanced schools at that time in the public school system. I went to one of those schools. There was you had to qualify to get into that school, and it was much more, let's say, learning culture in that school than in the other public schools. I don't know if they do that now, but they let kids advance faster in advanced courses in the same school. But what happens is that, especially in the black community, kids make fun of black kids who are more intelligent. And they embarrass them, they belittle them, and they fight with them sometimes, and they bully them so that they don't do good in school. So it's very difficult for really bright black kids in public schools, especially in the inner cities, where the other kids will deride them, make fun of them, sometimes beat them up, to make them come to their level. So, here it says, those who know the rules and regulations of the scriptures, but out of laziness or indolence, give up following. Indolence is a good word. It means lazy, but more than that also it could mean like not being well kept and being very, very against. According to their previous activities in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, they acquire a nature which is of a specific quality. The association of the living entity with the different modes of nature has been going on perpetually since the living entity is in contact with material nature. He acquires different types of mentality according to his association with the material modes, but this nature can be changed if one associates with a bona fide spiritual master and abides by his rules and the scriptures. Gradually, one can change his position from ignorance to goodness, or from passion to goodness. The conclusion is that blind faith in a particular mode of nature cannot help a person become elevated to the perfectional stage. One has to consider things carefully with intelligence in the association of a bona fide spiritual master. Thus, one can change his position to a higher mode of nature. Okay, so this explains why there are so many different religions, because people are speculating, and they're associating, they're coming under the control of the lower modes of nature, passion and ignorance. And the next purport, verse number 3, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. So that the third verse now explains exactly why there are so many different religions, so many different political parties, so many different concepts of life, so many different books saying, do this, don't do that, eat bananas, but don't eat eggs, or some, there's all kinds of books now, Every book tries to limit what you do. So in other words, if you have a book, right, doesn't matter what book it is, it's going to tell you to do something and not do something. Every book is like that, right? It's like, they write books about, how Trump is the best president in American history. And then there are other books, how Trump was the worst president in American history. So everybody's writing books and giving it, and they're saying, do this, don't do that, right? So it says here, everyone has a particular type of faith regardless of what he is, but his faith is considered good, passionate, or ignorant according to the nature he has acquired. Thus, according to his particular type of faith, one associates with certain persons. Now, the real fact is that every living being, as is stated in the 15th chapter, is originally a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, one is originally transcendental to all the modes of material nature. But when one forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and comes into contact with the material nature in conditional life, he generates his own position by association with different varieties of material nature. So this is John Locke. He opened the door. Everybody can speculate, right? So, huh?
I think he calls it the philosophy of mind.
Yes, yeah. The resultant artificial faith and existence are only material, although one may be conducted by some impression or some conception of life. Originally, he is nirguna, or transcendental. Therefore, one has to become cleansed of the material contamination that he has acquired in order to regain his relationship with the Supreme Lord. That is the only path back without fear, Krishna consciousness. If one is situated in Krishna consciousness, then that path is guaranteed for his elevation to the perfectional stage. If one does not take to this path of self-realization, then he is surely to be conducted by the influence of the modes of nature. So this is real learning technique. We have to learn, whether we're adults or children, to rise above the influence of the three modes of material nature, and that is by accepting the instructions of bona fide Siksha Diksha gurus and following those instructions and not deviating. And in order not to deviate, one should regularly come to classes spoken by genuine devotees, and one should regularly hear the correct understanding of Bhagavad Gita, meaning you read the verse and you also read the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Right? So that's what we're doing now. The word Shraddha, or faith, is very significant in this verse. Shraddha, or faith, originally comes out of the mode of goodness. One's faith may be in a demigod, or some created god, or some mental concoction. One's strong faith is supposed to be productive of works of material goodness. But in material conditional life, no works are completely purified. They are mixed. They are not in pure goodness. Pure goodness is transcendental. In purified goodness, one can understand the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As long as one's faith is not completely in purified goodness, the faith is subject to contamination by any of the modes of material nature. The contaminated modes of material nature expand to the heart. Therefore, according to the position of the heart in contact with a particular mode of material nature, one's faith is established. It should be understood. So that's a very significant sentence. Therefore, according to the position of the heart in contact with a particular mode of material nature, one's faith is established. It's just like a person is a vegetarian. Then they go to, let's say, Safeway or Fred Meyer, and they're walking past the meat section. And they remember that they used to eat meat and they liked it. And so they decide to buy some meat. Even though they stopped eating meat, they became vegetarian. But because that tendency was there, and they actually did that before, they whimsically decide to eat meat again. So that whimsicalness is based on the mode of passion. So these modes are vacillating. You know, when you're sleeping, it's a mode of ignorance. When you wake up, it's a mode of passion. If you come to Mangala Aarti and everything, it becomes mode of goodness. Then you go to work, it becomes mode of passion and ignorance again. You see. So during the day, we can go from influenced by one mode to influenced by the other mode, and so forth. And it happens to everyone, just like the person walking past the meat section, although they're a vegetarian, they decide to eat meat because they remember they were eating meat and they liked it. So everything depends on association, who we associate with, and it also depends on our determination to strictly follow Krishna consciousness. Therefore, according to the position of the heart in contact with a particular mode of material nature, one's faith is established. It should be understood that if one's heart is in the mode of goodness, his faith is also in the mode of goodness. So Dhritarashtra's heart was in the mode of, was influenced by his son, Duryodhana, right? He knew what the truth was. He knew who Krishna was. Krishna was also a relative, right? But because of his heart was with his son, Duryodhana, he deviated seriously, and he couldn't instruct his son properly. The same thing with anyone. When they become attached to something that's not Krishna conscious, that overrides everything else. Even though they might know, they might be trained in Bhagavad Gita, or they have their Bhakti Shastri course, they went through it with flying colors. It doesn't matter. It depends on where your heart is, what your heart is attracted to. See, heart and mind are connected, right? Sometimes they say the mind, sometimes they say the heart. But just like someone falls in love, let's say they have a love marriage. They say that in India, right? Love marriage, right? In other words, they didn't listen to what their parents said. They just went ahead, you know. In my language, they say, if you leave it up to your daughter, she'll marry either the guy that's playing the flute or the one that's playing the drums. In other words, they're both low-class people, right? So, yeah, anyway, the love marriage usually is, you know, they don't listen to what their parents say. They just marry some guy because, you know, he's got nice hair or a nice car or whatever. And usually it ends up being a disaster. So, but it's what grabbed their heart, right? And something about that person was so attractive that, you know, it reawakens some internal psychological thing, that the tendency that they have, and they become attracted to it, and then they're influenced by it. So Dhritarashtra, he could not instruct his son properly because he was attached to him, and Duryodhana basically controlled his father. That happens a lot. So it should be understood that if one's heart is in the mode of goodness, his faith is also in the mode of goodness. If his heart is in the mode of passion, his faith is also in the mode of passion. And if his heart is in the mode of darkness, illusion, his faith is also thus contaminated. Thus we find different types of faith in this world, and there are different types of religions due to different types of faith. The real principle of religious faith is situated in the mode of pure goodness, but because the heart is tainted, we find different types of religious principles. Thus, according to different types of faith, there are different types of worship. Yeah, so the Christians, especially once they convinced kings to become Christian, they changed the philosophy, and they accepted meat eating as normal, and there's nothing wrong with it. And instead of thou shalt not kill, they changed it to thou shalt not murder. So that opens the path to, you know, you can eat anything. You shouldn't eat human beings, but you can eat animals. And then they changed the philosophy. They said animals don't have a soul. So there you are. You know, that's why there's so many different sects in Christianity, and same thing in Islam, same thing everywhere. Because people get influenced by the modes of material nature, and it affects the way they think and what they put their faith in. Okay, so this one sentence led to this discussion where Indra thought that Krishna was a henpecked husband who only by the will of his wife Satyabhama took away the property of heaven, and therefore he thought that Krishna could be punished. Wow, that's a lot of assumptions, right? Based on a false understanding of who Krishna is. He forgot that the Lord is the proprietor of everything and cannot be henpecked. The Lord is fully independent, and by his will only he can have hundreds and thousands of wives like Satyabhama. He was not, therefore, attached to Satyabhama because she was a beautiful woman, but he was pleased with her devotional service and thus wanted to reciprocate the unalloyed devotion of his devotee. So, thank God we have Prabhupada's purports. Otherwise, we'd misinterpret everything. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question is on the, Indra already challenged Krishna when he was a child in the Govardhana Lila, right? Yeah. And again, when I read this verse as well, that he again went for a fight with Krishna.
It might not be the same Indra.
It may not be same Indra.
Indra is a titular position. It's a title position. So different people can become Indra. We would have to figure it out,
But in context to the same question, Maharaj. So even if it's Indra, he was not in illusion. When Krishna came himself, at least he's not aware of that Krishna's identity, that, okay, he's Krishna.
Well,
why
Dhritarashtra, wasn't he aware that Krishna was Krishna? Because he associated with his son and was very attached to his son, even though he knew things, he didn't follow them.
That's how the modes operate.
Yeah.
They influence your thinking.
Just like, let's say your wife has an argument with another devotee's wife. Which side would you take? Would you try and convince your wife that she's wrong?
Yeah, depends. Like, if I'm really convinced, so at times...
But then she would retaliate. So, oh, you're not supporting me? I'm your wife. Then I'm not going to cook for you anymore.
Yeah, that's okay.
So...
Yeah. To some extent, yes.
Of course. Yeah, so it's because of the association. So Duryodhana influenced his father. And his father, although he knows what the truth is, he's seeing Krishna. Not only Krishna as a relative, but he's seeing him, right? He lifted Govardhan Hill, right? They know all that, those things. And still, he didn't follow Krishna's advice. You see how it works?
Yeah.
When you get influenced by the modes of material nature due to association. So, just imagine, you're sending your kid to a school where for 6 to 8 hours they're associating with demons. Imagine the effect that has on a kid. You might not see it right away, but yeah, you see it. Even in kindergarten, like I give the example, there was this one boy, he was a very nice boy, right? When he was like, 3, 4, 5 years old, he was like chanting Hare Krishna, and has Jagannath, and he's doing a little bit of deity worship, and very enthusiastic, and kirtans, right? So they put him in a school, right? And in about 3 weeks to 1 month, he became dinosaur conscious. And he ended up having 40 little dinosaurs. Instead of Jagannath, he had dinosaurs. Right? And he knew the names of each one.
My friend's son also like that.
What's that?
One of my friend's son also like that. And they are proud of that.
Yeah, he's proud that he knows all these different dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
You see how association has such an effect on people, especially kids. Now, the worst thing for a kid is to be shunned by the other kids. So that peer pressure is another thing that's very powerful, because everyone says, well, it's nice to eat meat. So eventually the kid says, oh, You know, I don't have any, if I don't eat meat, I don't have any friends in school. You see how it works? So association is a very, very important thing in everybody's life. Okay, any other questions?
One more quick. So, Maharaj, everything is in the Goloka also, right? So, when we said in this specifically verse, the Parijat is only in heavenly planet. Sorry, only in the heaven. So, is it possible that there are certain things which is not in Goloka and still exist elsewhere?
Well, Parijata is a tree, so there are Kalpavriksha trees in the spiritual world. So it's a tree. So does it have to be a Parijata tree? Not necessarily. A Kalpavriksha tree is much greater than a Parijata tree because it can give you any amount of fruit and flowers or whatever. So the idea that there's a tree, that's what's important. Right? Now, are there demons in the spiritual world? No, but people hear about demons, but they never see the demons. So there are demons in a sense, because they hear about them, but they're not physically there. So, do people lie in the spiritual world? No, they don't lie. But sometimes Krishna may say something to trick the gopis, but that's not considered a lie. Why? Because Krishna can do anything. You know, and whatever he does is always good. Whereas a lie in the material world is actually bad. You see, so but a lie in the spiritual world, especially if it's Krishna, it's not bad. It gives pleasure to the devotees. Okay, so you have to read more about, in the Bhagavatam, it explains all these things. Okay, we'll stop right there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Sing.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bando Mu